Alrighty. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this little discussion on marketing and the church. I am Angela Ciolana, and I am with Inspired Angela, where I am trying. This is my goal is to help Catholics who work in parishes and in apostolates and work with media. To really inspire you, encourage you, and to give you some tools to do your job even better. So today I am speaking with a pal of mine who is also a fantastic person in terms of marketing and the church to talk to, Pat Padley. Hi, Pat. How are you?
Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm great. Great.
Super.
It's like a Thursday evening and it's been a busy day, but I'm excited to talk about
Yes.
this.
Yes, everyone who is watching and listening will have to forgive any brain drain on either of our parts. So I guess we want to launch into this, but before we do, I want everybody to know why they should listen to you and what you have to say and how you can help our audience today. So, can you kind of give a little background on your Catholic street cred as well as your marketing street cred?
Well, I was baptized Catholic, so I mean, what else do you need to know? Yeah, happy to. So I guess a little bit about me is, well, we'll start kind of professionally, and then I'll talk really like my faith wise. So um, professionally, I went to school for film and marketing, and I also got a minor in film scoring. Went to the University of Tulsa, and graduated and had my own video production business for a while. And then when the economy kind of went down, I ended up getting hired on at an ad agency because I had worked with a whole bunch of ad agencies, and and started in social media and digital marketing. Moved on from that ad agency, and now I'm currently at one called DEG, which is here in Kansas City, and we are a full service digital ad agency, which basically means we do anything that pertains to digital. So that could be email marketing, social media, web video, creating websites, enterprise collaboration, which is like your like big companies, like their intranets and extranets of like what people log into. And we are pretty big actually. So we're about 200 people or so, and we've been like one of the fastest growing companies in like the last, I think, 4 or 5 years. So I started there about 4 years ago, and I was like employee number 30, and now we're like about like 200 people. So
Wow,
it's been really great.
congratulations.
Yeah, and then kind of going backwards and talking about sort of my faith and how it relates to this. So born and raised Catholic, and I didn't go to a Catholic college. I went to Catholic school all the way up until college, and so I went to the University of Tulsa, which interestingly enough decides to recruit a lot of private schools, and so there ends up being, I think, about maybe like 20% or maybe 25% of the student body there actually has gone to like parochial and Catholic school because they've recruited, most private schools are Catholic schools. And so they have a phenomenal Newman Center there. And that is really where my faith came alive. And, I was always involved in my faith growing up, but, I went on a tech retreat, helped serve on some retreats, was part of helping the Pure Ministry team with different events, was part of the music ministry there, and it was just really a great opportunity for me to really take ownership of my faith during that time period. And while I was there, I met a wonderful person named Steve Nelson. And Steve,
Yay.
as some of you may know if you are like a podcast listener, Steve has been very involved with an organization called SQPN, which stands for the StarQuest Production Network, which is an organization that advocates for the use of new media via things like podcasting and web video, and and uses that to help evangelize. And so while I was there, Steve and I, actually it was Steve's idea, it wasn't my idea, but Steve was like, "Hey, what do you think? I've been listening to podcasts," and I'm like, "Podcasts? Like that's not even, is that like a thing?" And and turns out it is. And so. uh, basically, we started a podcast, and the podcast was called On the U, and it was a podcast. Even though we weren't a college, Catholic college, it was a podcast for Catholic college students. So, so I got involved in Catholic new media. That was sort of my first introduction, and from there, it sparked into Twitter conversations and everything. And then for a while, I was on the actual SQPN board for about 4.5 years, and also previously, after I graduated from college, my brother Nick Padley and I started another podcast called In Between Sundays, which was sort of what happens after college. So for those people who are young adults and are Catholic and starting their careers and things like that, we talked a lot about sort of the day in day out of what happens in between Sundays, hence the title. So, and sorry, I know it's a long-winded answer, but
No.
since then, I write on my blog and advise people on how to use marketing and media based on my experience from my professional career and sort of adapting it for how do you use some of the same strategies to help evangelize. And then I would say recently, my wife and I say recently, I guess it's about 2 years now, but we've also have sort of a personal blog called a coupleofcatholics.com. So been very involved in both the secular world, if you will, in marketing, and in also speaking and advising on Catholic use of media and marketing. So
Right.
yeah, that's my
So,
street cred.
and I've been a Pat Padley fan since On the U days, because our college years just kind of coincided. So it
Right.
was neat to find a Catholic college podcast that I could listen to, and then, translating into In Between Sundays. And so this particular hangout that we're doing right now, this discussion, is kind of a, I guess, brainchild of a conversation that we had. And
Mm-hmm.
I was really struck by your presentation at the recent CNMC Catholic New Media Celebration/Conference in Atlanta. And you were talking about what the church can learn from ad agencies. Of course, working at an ad agency.
Right.
Um, and that really struck a chord with me because longtime readers of my blog will know that I wrote I guess I don't really like to play up my street cred, but it was kind of a groundbreaking thesis, and I talked a lot about marketing in that thesis. In terms of evangelization, the new evangelization. And so, what I want to really pick your brain about today is about the connection between marketing and the new evangelization, because I feel very strongly, and I know you feel very strongly, that every parish, every apostolate in the church needs to know about what marketing actually is, and how it can be, how it will be effective and helpful, and what people in the church can learn from individuals like yourself who are in the marketing business. So, a lot of people in the church interchangeably use the terms marketing and advertising or selling.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a distinction between those two kind of ideas, marketing and selling or advertising. So, what is wrong with that whole those terms?
So it's a tough question because there is a sense of that those terms are interchangeable, right?
Right.
Because when you look at it from from a business perspective, the purpose of marketing typically, although it certainly has a broad range of what I would call goals or objectives, but typically the purpose of marketing in a business is to broaden your awareness and so that you can sell more, right? It's perfectly understandable that those terms of marketing and selling are sort of synonymous as being having a relationship with one another. I think when it comes to relating that back to evangelization, um, for me, so evangelization to me adds a relationship element, like a personal relationship with the Lord and a personal relationship with other Christians. And so I guess when I look at marketing and evangelization, I do think there's a relationship there as well. So if you were to take out, say, just the idea of marketing as selling, right?
Hmm.
Technically, evangelization is selling of an idea, right? The idea that Jesus is the Lord, that there's a Trinity, yada yada yada. Go through the creed, right? Um,
Okay, if you want to
right.
put it that way.
Well, right, but I mean, essentially, you're selling, and I hate to. This is going to sound more like I'm boiling it down to being way more simplified than it is, but you are
Hmm.
in some form of sense selling a philosophy, right? A religion. You're selling an experience with the Lord, right? And so, obviously, that's an overly simplified definition. But when you look at evangelization as it relates to marketing, the way I look at those two things is evangelization to me sort of implies a relationship between the Lord and others, and then marketing sort of is more the communication aspect of evangelization, right? So I wouldn't look at like when we say we need to get people to insert church event like the whatever donuts on Sunday, right? Well, how are people
Hmm.
going to know about it? Well, we need to market that event, or we need to market our Bible study, right? We need to communicate that to other people.
Sure.
And so I guess I look at all of those terms and those actions have sort of a relationship together, and I would say in a good way that if you're doing evangelization well, then your communication is likely well in a good spot as well, right? Because you've been able to kind of do the tip of the iceberg piece and reach people and then bring them into a further path down the road into evangelization.
Right. And maybe I can kind of insert myself and unscare a few
Please
people
do.
who are a little bit
Please do,
scared
because
right now.
I'll be honest, I sometimes I think oversimplify it because for me
Sure.
it's like I work in marketing all the time, so sometimes it's hard to remove myself and sort of put on the religious hat, and
Right, exactly. And that's why I'm here to kind of like try to well no, like to try to relate
right,
with the people who are like sitting in a parish office right now and like, huh? Because I work in an evangelization apostolate. So we talk about evangelization like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so from my perspective, like evangelization is sharing the gospel, and your main goal is to kind of introduce Jesus to this person you're sharing this with, and ultimately that your hope is that they would establish, have a meaningful relationship with Jesus Christ.
right,
And so that's our bottom line in the church, right? Like to have more people get to know, have an encounter with Jesus, and to grow in a relationship with Him. And so the bottom line in the world that you live in is the dollar, right?
right,
And so I think, we can, when we look at marketing, yes, there is definitely a sense in which marketing is, getting people to the parish breakfast, or, getting people to come to even Sunday Mass.
hmm,
Um, but there's also the sense that I really want to focus on today, which is that marketing is actually evangelization in a way. And actually, we're
right.
seeing companies like Google and Apple are actually giving people job titles where they are an evangelist.
It's interesting that you say that because while you were talking, one of the things I was thinking about is from a marketing perspective, yes, most of the time it is sort of about selling our products or making money, right? But
Hmm.
but more and more you're seeing that companies are using strategies that aren't solely about selling their products, but they might be selling the idea or selling the idea of a relationship with you as a customer and a
Right.
relationship with you as part of the brand, and that the brand isn't the company's anymore, but the brand is yours, right? So that's why you're seeing a lot of those sort of titles change of like, chief evangelist or customer evangelization or things like that.
Yeah. So it's more about, I mean, when I was in marketing classes in college, it was about all about the relationship with the customer, and it's not just kind of this fakey fake type of thing. I mean, marketers really want a meaningful
Hmm.
relationship with the customer. So, can you kind of talk about how you approach that as a marketer?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the key, particularly as we move into the 21st century, and then you're seeing a lot of, when you look at demographics wise, you're seeing a lot of people, millennials particularly, have a huge need for trust, right? Like trust is one of the main things that I think from if you were to say like a brand perspective, companies are looking to build with a handful of people. And as millennials have grown up, for example, millennials are some of the least trusting people, right? Because we've grown up, and we've grown up and you can see through, what someone may post in social media versus what their reality is, and you sort of see through the smoke screen, right? And
Mhm.
or like behind the curtain, like the guy in Wizard of Oz, and so a lot of companies are having to sort of adapt and are focusing more on relationship. I just had an opportunity actually to so we just had in Kansas City they had what's called the Chipotle Cultivate Festival, which is basically Chipotle has been going around to different cities, and they kind of put on like a little music festival, and then they also teach you about food and how their food's raised, and it's very focused on trying to, one, build relationship with their customers, show that they're a transparent brand. Here's where we source our ingredients for our food, and here's how our food's made, and then, oh, we're also going to entertain you by bringing in music artists. And I had a really good opportunity to actually sit down with the Chipotle social media team because they were in town, and just talking to them, and they are very solely focused on relationships. So much so that
Mhm.
if you were to say tweet to at, I think it's like Chipotle tweets or something like that, that they will make sure that all of their tweets are signed by a person's name, and it's a very simple thing, right? But it's a simple thing that shows that that is still part of we're in a relationship with you, and it's literally like four people that manage their social, and so it's like, yeah, I'm Rusty, and that tweet's for me, and like I want to make sure that like I sign that, and that it's not so much just about sharing my love for Chipotle, but it's truly like I know that you like that's where you go every Tuesday for lunch, and like that's your Chipotle. Like that was one of the things they said a lot was, it's all about what makes it your Chipotle, right? And that speaks back to that idea of companies wanting to build a relationship, and in seeing that relationship as an aspect of marketing, so much so that a lot of companies will have their customer service right next to their marketing team because they're starting to see those as sort of synonymous with one another.
Right. And part of that, the reason that Chipotle has a music festival is because that's what they know about their customer is that their customer is probably going to come to a
Right.
music festival.
It's something
Um,
that their customer cares about.
right, exactly. So that's a key part of marketing is knowing who your audience is, so that you can have that relationship and speak in meaningful ways with that person or a group of people and so forth, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, so I think there's definitely um, a lesson, I think, for just your typical parish in that, just being able to, um, first of all, make it more personal. what that example you gave is something that a parish could definitely very easily do. And also, getting to know your audience. So, could you? I know there's a specific sort of practice that brands do when they are um, kind of thinking about their customer, and I'm wondering if you're catching on to what I'm thinking about. But uh,
Well, I think when you're saying those kinds of things, what comes to mind from a marketing perspective is things like developing marketing personas.
right?
Maybe I could explain a little bit more about what that is.
Yeah, please.
Um, a persona is more than just demographics. When we look at a persona and trying to develop who is it who maybe we want to target with a specific communication, it would be, yes, there's demographics, like where do they live, who are they, what are their ages, are they male, female, but then there's more even things like psychographics or sort of life states. So are they a mom? Do they have kids? Are they married? Are they a single mom? Are How often do they shop? Do they shop online? Do they shop in store? Do they do both? What percentage of that happens? And so what happens is, as a marketer, you'll start to put together sort of this profile. We actually do this at DEG. So we'll actually create what's called we try to take the persona and translate it back into how we want to communicate back to the customer. And what we produce is something called like a digital brand guide, or sometimes known as like a social voice guide. And what that is it's basically a document that says, okay, Mary is a stay-at-home mom. She's sort of the decision maker for health decisions. The husband's there, but she's also the one that sort of prods the husband to go. And so how does Mary want to be spoken to? Well, Mary doesn't want to be spoken down to, because she's a millennial mom and she can look on her phone and go to WebMD and kind of freak herself out when she sees whatever the answer is on WebMD. But so how do we communicate to her that's in a way that aligns with sort of empathizing with her state, with whatever's going on in her family, but also be in a way that is knowledgeable. And right now I'm speaking specifically of one of the brands that I work with that's a health brand, and where what they found was that their persona ended up being sort of based on one of their doctors at this hospital, who was he was also a mom, so there was that sort of related tone. And then they found out that speaking as a mom, but sort of as somewhat of an authority figure because they are a doctor. So there's sort of a relationship that then can be built. In what we're talking about there is just what's the tonality, what's the kind of verbiage that we use. And
Right.
we sometimes, and this is maybe getting a little too deep, but sometimes we even get so specific as, does this person use things like LOL in their language? Does this person use emoticons, right? How does this, what is the verbiage that's right for then meeting that consumer for where they are? And I think that's the point when you look at something like a persona, or when you try to translate that into evangelization, is you always hear people in ministry say, well, we want to make sure we're meeting them where they are. Right? Marketers try to do the same thing, right? They want to know where you are in a journey. Their journey is just different because it's more like a sales pipeline, right? Where are you in terms of your consideration of our product? From an evangelization standpoint, it's the same thing, but it's, where are you in your faith journey? Do you know of Jesus at all? Are you even Christian? Maybe you're Christian but not Catholic, or maybe you only go to church, Christmas and Easter, or maybe you go to church just when you're feeling bad and you need to go to confession, or there's this whole wide range. Or maybe you grew up Catholic, you're very devout Catholic, but maybe you don't know the faith, right? Maybe you could be devout, but maybe you're not catechized well, and so there's a whole wide range. And I think that's the challenge. I think when you compare it to marketing, is how do you meet people where they are in that faith journey, right? Because it is a journey, and everybody's at different spots, to try to reach them.
Yeah, and that can be totally overwhelming because
Right.
there's so many different options, right, for parishes. And so I think one of the great things that I've gleaned from just using that tool of marketing personas in my evangelization work is, when I'm promoting an event, I try to come up with maybe one or two personas because there's such a wide range of people that we're serving, and just see, like what kind of car does this guy like? What if I'm doing like right now I'm working on promoting a men's conference. So I'm looking at, what does this guy drive? What does he listen to? What does he what kind of Catholic media does he consume, if any? What is his relationship with God? Yeah, I mean, what kind of man does he want to be? So all of these things, and I think that can really help you as a tool to just kind of think about how you're going to share your message. So I want to kind of move forward because I know we can talk about this all night, but to talk more about marketing and evangelization as storytelling. And you kind of touched on this in your presentation at CNMC. But so when we're talking about marketing, we're talking about not only relationships, but also about telling the story of a brand. And in our case, in the church's case, the story of your parish, the story of your apostolate, the story of the Catholic Church, et cetera. So, what kind of give us a little bit of your day to day in terms of how you think of storytelling and telling stories as part of what you do as a marketer?
Okay. Um, I think from a storytelling perspective, and I honestly, I think that's one of the things that I love most about my job is I'm a very creative person, and I guess I didn't get into the details, but in my job, part of my job is the strategy, so sort of setting the plan, and then the other part of my job is how do we communicate that strategy, so it's more the creative aspect, and with my creative skills of video production and things like that. So, so storytelling for me is sort of very close to, it's just a huge passion of mine. In terms of like day to day, there's such a wide range of storytelling, and like storytelling through video, for example, what we do as a marketing agency, video to us, for example, is one of the most emotive ways to truly share an emotion, to completely take someone from one point and through a whole story arc and end it at a point as well. And even though you're seeing the video shorten up into things like Instagram videos like 15 seconds or Vine videos or 5 seconds, you'll notice that a lot of the videos that even people are attracted to are ones that tell an interesting story, sort of a start, middle, and an ending. And so for us, what we're always looking at is, first and foremost, sort of what's the goal? Like, what's the objective? What are we trying to accomplish? And then what's the best way, which is more the strategy side, on how we accomplish that. And I think when I was at the CMC and trying to kind of relate storytelling to how that relates to evangelization, I think I gave Patrick Madrid's example of stained glass. So if you've ever listened, Patrick Madrid has a fantastic talk. It's all about why he's Catholic. And it's just this beautiful witness. And what he talks about, which hit me hard because my dad actually isn't Catholic. My dad's Presbyterian. And when you look at things from a stained glass perspective, there's sort of two ways that you look at stained glass. One is inside the church, and one is outside the church. And to most people who are maybe non-Catholic or maybe even marginally, sort of associated with the church, sometimes what the church does sort of looks like what stained glass looks like from the outside, and it's sort of dull and dark, and it just doesn't look very pretty. But then once you go into the church and you see the glass from how it's supposed to be meant to be seen, right? You see it, with the sun shining through it, and you see the beautiful colors, and then the actual story of the window. It's very much the same thing for our non-Catholic or non-Christian brothers and sisters, and how they sometimes see very Catholic things like genuflecting or holy water and those kinds of things. And so, to me, finding a way to connect that beauty with the message of the church. A lot of times when I'm speaking about marketing as it relates to evangelization, to me, it's not so much that the message of the church needs to change, like not really at all, right? The message of the church has
Mhm.
been beautiful and amazing and true for 2,000 plus years, right? It's the delivery of that message. So how do you package the message into a way where you are meeting people where they are? And maybe it's telling a personal story, or maybe it is a video, or maybe it is, a message in a bulletin. But a lot of times it's when you connect something personal that there's something that can be related between two people, that those kind of stories really come to life. And so we do the same thing from a marketing perspective. We try to dig sort of what's the deeper level, the deeper meaning of what we're trying to accomplish, and then how do you make a story come to life within different marketing tactics.
Right. So that might seem kind of like abstract for somebody who isn't in a marketing environment. Um, so, what does that have to do with, um, kind of maybe more concretely with the importance of storytelling from a parish's perspective? Like what is the kind of kernel of knowledge that is really like, okay, I'm going to take this and this is what I'm going to keep in mind as I'm doing my parish communications, or you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think so. And so I guess, to me, I think from a parish perspective, something to keep in mind would be, how do you drill your story down into something that is so simple that anyone can get it, right?
Hmm.
And sort of what we as a parish stand for and what we're striving for.
Hmm.
And that kind of goes back to sort of the idea of like maybe like an elevator pitch, right? So an elevator pitch is sort of well known as, how do you tell a story, but you drill it down to just the most essence, the most essential pieces of what you need to try to communicate, and that is sort of like your purpose or your sort of meaning of what you're trying to communicate. And the reason it's an elevator pitch is because if you're in an elevator with somebody, you only have 5-10 seconds or whatever as you go up and down floors, and how do you kind of communicate those essential pieces? And so I think from a parish perspective, it's important to, we can't be everything to everyone, right?
Hmm.
As much as, you know, obviously our goal as a church is to evangelize to the masses, right? But to be successful, you have to sort of drill down to what are those essential things that you want to focus on, and
Hmm.
then who are who's that main focus, like you were saying, like the one or two personas or the one or two targets that you're really trying to capture. And you can have multiple things, right?
Right.
The one church program has sort of one main focus, and then another church program is focused on sort of a whole nother audience, and you might communicate those two things differently. But I think for a parish, it's important that even if those two programs or those two communications are speaking to different people, that at the end of the day, it all ladders back up to one sort of holistic purpose or one whole sort of story that you would want to tell. And maybe a good way of trying to sort of encapsulate that is, a lot of different priests have sort of their different focuses and charisms, right?
Hmm.
We were at a parish. It was the parish we got married. Is a beautiful parish called St. Peter's in Kansas City, and that parish sits right on the border of a very wealthy area and a very poor area. And that priest, his charism and his focus, it's very beautiful, was very focused on social outreach. So much so that during holiday times, he and a handful of parishioners will go and just walk around and just let people know that we're here. We have a food pantry. We're here for you. We just want to let you know that we exist.
Hmm.
And that was the way of them living out what their story is that, yes, we are a very wealthy parish because we're next to this wealthy area and we've got a great Catholic school and we have all these really great things. But at the end of the day, what are we focused on? We're focused on outreach. We're focused on outreach to those people that no one will outreach to. And that was sort of the main story that priest, as being the pastor, was focused on for the parish.
Yeah, I think every parish has a story, but they don't realize it. Every
Right.
parish is so unique. Um, because every parish is at a different location, but also because it's made up of a different group of people,
Hmm.
and it was founded for a particular reason. And when you look at, your parish, those of you who are watching and listening to this, um, there really is a story that you can tell. And I think that will help people to not only be attracted to your parish, but also to feel like to have a sense of ownership
Hmm.
with the parish, to relate to the idea of your parish. And so, we've covered a lot of stuff. I wanted to keep this short to really just whet people's appetites. To really like, we could, Pat, as well as I do, that we could sit here and talk for at least 2 hours about all this stuff.
Sure.
And But I really want to encourage people to go to your website, and to start basking in the goodness of all that you are going to be putting forth. I know that you, in a recent blog, you talked about how you want to really focus on this more and on sharing your marketing insights and knowledge with the church. So, somebody's interested in learning more. What kind of next steps would you recommend for them?
Sure. So, and thank you for that. I mean, I definitely have felt very much that the Lord is calling me to use my skills to sort of evangelize the church and how to use marketing, specifically digital tools and things like that. So, in terms of me, you can find my blog. It's patrickpadley.com. And there, my main focus is really trying to communicate sort of learnings from my professional life and how does that relate back to the church. So, I'm working on a number of different projects and some writing as well, and hoping to do simple things like what are ways that we can take tactics learned from the marketing world and improve a bulletin, or what are ways that we can take a learning from, like we were just talking about, storytelling, and how do I sort of get down to that essence of my story. And there's so much goodness out there by being able to take what major brands like Fortune 500 brands are doing, and in drilling it down to how do we relate that back to evangelization. I, in a couple of my presentations, look at sort of relating the church to McDonald's uh, as almost a franchise model. And the reason I say that is because you have sort of the Vatican is HQ over in Rome, and then you have all these little dioceses that are sort of like regional offices, and McDonald's is the same way. They have like their headquarters in Chicago, and then they've got all these regional offices, and then they have all these franchises which could kind of be like parishes, and everybody serves the same meal every day, right? It's very like sort of the same thing, so if you look at the way like a company like McDonald's communicates, we have the best message that we could ever tell anyone. As the church,
Mhm.
we have such a gift, the truth of our faith, and so trying to find ways that we can use those kinds of marketing tools and those tactics and translate it to sharing the beauty of our faith. And so that's what I try to write about. I'm hoping to also just share other resources on there on a more frequent basis, even simple things for parishes. I know, when you're looking at designing a website or maybe an email, even things like stock photography, like where do you find really good stock photography for, cheap or even sort of rights-free, royalty-free photography. So there's that, and then obviously your blog. Your blog is great for trying to encourage parishes on both communication as well as just being great evangelizers in their own postulates as well. So, um,
Thanks.
of course.
Well,
um,
I for one am looking forward to learning from you and continuing to learn from you. And I would definitely encourage everyone to go to patrickpadley.com and sign up for the email list so that you can keep in touch with Pat, and also make sure you don't miss anything. And go follow him on Twitter at ppadley. He is always posting and sharing little links, articles, marketing insight as well. Yeah, definitely want to encourage everybody to go do those things.
Yeah, and one thing I might do just for your audience specifically, Angela, is if you have some people that are interested. I know we talked a little bit about my presentation from the CNMC. I have an audio recording and the actual slides from the presentation, and so I will give you a special link that you can share with your folks so that they can go ahead and get that. So.
Oh, snap! Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, like I said, we could be here all night, but we're going to wrap it up. And thank you again so much for joining me, and I look forward to so much more.
Thank you, Angela.
All right, everybody. So stay tuned as usual to Inspired Angela for great conversations like this one with people who are very, very smart and very encouraging and inspiring. And I have a couple of really great guests that I'm looking forward to inviting on. And so stay subscribed, and we'll see you next time.